Charles exited this plane June 4th, 2021. He left this plane in a very unusual manner that I will describe in a few. But I was asked to say some words at his celebration of life, which I was honored to do. And I told the story of meeting Charles for the first time in the 1990s. And I was working at the time with a very gifted Jungian astrologer named Pamela Dickens. And one day she came in and says, I have made this really powerful connection with this artist. And I went, wow. And I met Charles, and he and I became friends at that point. And shortly after, Charles and Pamela decided to get married, and they asked me to officiate. And I searched through ancient wisdom and sacred texts to find something that might be appropriate for the two of them. And I came upon the story of the corpse bride. And on one hand, I thought this is a really risky material for a wedding. But on the other hand, they did choose to get married on Halloween night. So I found this story which is about a traveler on the path of life. And on the path, they come upon this root strangely growing out of the ground. And the more they looked at it, the more it looked like a human finger. And they put a ring on it and pulled it into life. And that was so true about Pamela and Charles, because both of them pulled the most unusual root out of the ground to form their career. Charles is a shamanic artist who does sacred geometry and the master of the mandala, and Pamela, a Jungian astrologist. I mean, you don't see too many of those walking on the path of life. Yet they took that chance and they lived it and they brought it to life in magical ways that we've experienced. Pamela left her body in 2000 from breast cancer that took her quickly. And it really felt like she stayed around as his muse and inspiration, because the works that he developed and produced after that are just amazing, and you've just experienced that. So I came to feel that another root seemed to grow up into the invisible world. And I think Pamela pulled on it that night when Charles had bleeding in his brain. His son, Sean, found him and they life-flighted him to the Cleveland Clinic. And he was released and sent to rehabilitation, which was convenient for me because it was halfway between my work and my house. So I popped in frequently to visit with him. And at first, Charles was still able to go deep and deeply metaphysical, but then he would drift off into like a dementia haze. So he was that way for a bit. And then the next time I saw him, he came out of his room and he saw me and goes, "The doctor said I'm dying." And evidently a doctor came in and says, "The extent of your brain bleed is so severe that like nobody comes back from here. So if you want to get something accomplished, it's time." And so the nursing staff all kind of got word about his videos on YouTube, and he became quite the celebrity there for a while. Then I went back and I visited him again, and I walked into his room, and he was not eating food anymore at this point, and he was attempting to stand on the seat of his wheelchair. And I grabbed him and went, "Charles, not a good idea." And he looks at me, he realizes who I am, and he gives me this hug that I'll never forget. And then he just kept climbing and climbing every chair. I walked him around a bit, and he's trying to climb the wall. And I didn't quite understand. And the nurse says, "Yeah, we don't know why he's doing that." But so they took care of him, and I was driving home and I thought, yeah, he's climbing the stairway to heaven. So, and then the last time I saw him, the night before he died, I visited him and his eyes were open, but he wasn't seeing anything in this world. He was already seeing over to the other world. And somewhere in my past, I learned how to do anointings. So I had the essential oil of frankincense, and I anointed his forehead with the Star of David, the masculine trinity, and the feminine trinity. And I learned that the great ones should have their hands anointed as well. And I took his artist hands and I made that sacred symbol and anointed him for his journey. And the next morning, I think 6 a.m., bright and early, Pamela fully pulled that root out into the other world, and the sacred circle has been complete. I hope you've enjoyed this and are inspired by the works of Charles Gilchrist.